Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor Asghar Khan, and I will be chairing today's meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live on Leeds City Council's YouTube channel, and I extend warm welcome to everyone tuning it through YouTube. This is the fourth meeting of the 2023-24 municipal year, and today we will be continuing our recent focus on staffing through a detailed look at staff wellbeing and mental health, which I know has been a major focus following the impact of the pandemic. As we all know, the financial picture of the council and the local authority sector as a whole is very challenging, with the cost of living crisis and higher interest rates, as well as increased demand for services, having a real impact on our budget. We are therefore looking at two financial reports today: the month 4 financial position, which is our in-year position, and looking forward through the medium-term financial strategy. Money is important, but we also need overarching strategy setting out our ambition to tackle inequality, deliver inclusive growth, reach net zero, and support the health and well-being of Leeds residents. We are therefore also looking at the latest position on the update to our best city ambition. At this point, I would like to invite everyone to formally introduce themselves, and I will go around the room to my left.
Morning, my name is Councillor Hannah Bithell. I represent Kirkstall. Thank you.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson, representing Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Sharon Burke, representing Middleton Park.
My name's Andy Parnham. I'm a Labour Party councillor for Armley.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Tom Hinchcliffe, Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Morning, everyone. Mike Eakins, Head of Policy and Strategy and Performance.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Culver, Head of Health, Safety and Wellbeing for the Council.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Andy Dodman and I'm the Chief HR Officer for the Council.
Morning, Mariana Pexton, Director of Strategy and Resources. My apologies today. I need to just leave for about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour at 11:15 because of, as Councillor Khan said, the financial context. We've got a call with all partners this morning, so direct clash, but I'll watch the recording and I'm sure Rob will let me know of any actions. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Victoria Bradshaw. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Council.
Morning, Councillor Winkage, you're representing Morley South.
Councillor Sam Firth for the Harewood Ward.
Councillor Diane Chapman for Rothwell Ward.
Morning, everyone. Rob Clayton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you for that introduction. And moving to the item agenda then, can I ask Rob to take us through the first 5 items of the business, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Khan. Just the first 5 formal items that we take at each meeting. Item 1 is appeals, and we have had no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Item 2 is exclusions of the public, and there are no items excluded from the public domain. Item 3, late items. There are no late items. Item 4, declarations of interest under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct. If anyone has any, they should raise them now. I will take silence as a no. And then item 5, Chair, is apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Gohar Almas and Councillor Matthew Robinson. On the last apology, we're expecting Councillor Andrew Carter, who unfortunately has also passed his apologies. So just to note that as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. So item 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of September. Do members accept these minutes are a true and correct record? Yep. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Diane.
Can I just say, under the matters arising from the last meeting or the previous meeting, it does say that Rothwell Ward had a briefing about Leeds 2023. We didn't have any verbal or written correspondence prior to last meeting.
Rob, do you want to pick you up?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Chapman. It was my understanding that was the case, but I will obviously chase that, Councillor Chapman, and ensure that that does take place. So I will pick that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Can I ask Rob, is there any matter rising do you want to pick up, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just a few updates from last time. So minute 34, there was a request, I think, from Councillor Bithell around more detail on the EDI and protected characteristics. So I passed that request on to colleagues in HR, and that is being worked on. And I think the notion was to have it shared with the member champion. So that is just to assure you that's underway. Minute 35, Electoral Commission report was requested, which summarised the elections from May 2023. That has been circulated to board members. And then minute 36, which was the off-log item, there were some queries from members regarding adult social care that I have passed on to that service, but I am still waiting their response. I think Councillor Firth, it was you that raised it, so I will be sending them on to you when I get that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other matters rising from board members? Councillor Bithell.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the electoral stuff, it would just be nice to note that I had a really helpful meeting on the back of it with officers around our trans worker for trans people to be able to vote without triggering their gender dysphoria. So it would be really great if anyone reads the minutes, if they want any assistance with that or any information. We will be coming out with a comms plan around it, but also to get in touch with me. Thanks.
Councillor Bithell, I can note that in the meeting minutes from today. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other matters rising, please? Nope. Okay. Thank you. We will now move to agenda item 7, which is an update of staff wellbeing and mental health, which is on page 15 of the agenda pack. I am pleased to welcome Mariana, Andy and Lisa to run us through this report. And I understand we have a presentation which members have been sent in advance of today's meeting. Andy, do you want to lead on this, please? Go through the presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, good morning again, everybody. So I'm Andy Dolman from the HR team. So a very brief introduction from me on this important item. So as the Chair has said, and as colleagues will know, we have prioritised the health and well-being of our workforce over the last few years. And as many of you know, it is a key component of our people's strategy and our organisational plan. And over the last few years, we have shared quite a few updates and papers with this scrutiny board, focused on our general wellbeing offer, obviously our response to COVID over 2020 and 21, and perhaps more recently, we've updated you on how we've managed absence and attendance management as an organisation. However, more recently, we've wanted to concentrate on mental health and wellbeing. So what we've done this time round is share a paper that you've had in your bundle. And in a second, I'll pass over to Lisa, who will take you through the presentation. So this paper and presentation is very much about sharing with you our current thinking on mental health, our current direction of travel. But we are very keen to seek your views on it, to get your feedback on that direction of travel. And then we can filter that in, and then at a later date, obviously come back to you with some progress and update on that. So what I'll do is I'll pause and hand over to Lisa, who is our Head of Health, Safety and Wellbeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for welcoming me, everyone, today. This is such an enormous topic, and it is balanced in its importance with its breadth. And it's something that is very much a journey of a responsible employer. And I think that's something we most certainly are. We have a presentation today that I hope will give us a little canter through the work we're doing, where we've come from, where we are now, and where we'd like to be. And I'd really appreciate your steer and guidance on if you feel that is the right direction of travel. It really is a big area, but I'm mindful that I am a newbie here at Leeds City Council. I am yet a year in, but I have a clear memory of when I started on the 1st of December last year, when I was met with every meeting, every call, every introduction with a colleague that started with, "I hope you are well. How are you? Can I help?" And that really demonstrated to me the check-in we have, the culture we have around looking after each other. That's a really, really good place for us to be, because we can build an awful lot, but that takes time. And so we are in a very, very fortunate position that our values and our behaviours are really ingrained in our DNA. And that's just how we roll here at Leeds City Council. Thank you. Rob is going to navigate for me. Thank you. So, are you well? It's a statement, but it has a really big impact, doesn't it? Are you well? What is well-being? We hear it all the time. Well-being is, are you okay? Are you well? And there are many different concepts and parts of that, because we're not machines, we're individuals. But we know that there are 5 pillars to well-being, and they are social well-being, community well-being, physical health well-being, financial and career well-being. And as a responsible employer, we know that we have a sphere of influence around those. Some we can really impact positively or negatively. On our part, we want it to be positive. And the other areas, we don't have such a big influence, but we want to support colleagues to be their best, to bring their whole self to work and be confident about it in a safe space. And it's the whole person, the whole point, because we know that happy, healthy colleagues who are here create a really thriving organisation. So we have 3 commitments to our colleagues. Promote a positive mental health and well-being culture. And that brings in other elements like equality, diversity and inclusivity. So we obviously have a legal responsibility there also. We have health and safety under the Health and Safety at Work Act and the management regulations with regards to work-related stress. And then the second commitment is to prevent work-related stress where possible. We do have huge challenges nationally. We know that we have a financial crisis. How we operate as a healthy organisation has a real effect on the me, the we and the us, and also the service we deliver to the City of Leeds. And the third element is supporting our colleagues to absolutely be their best, to be flexible, to listen, to reflect and respond to their needs so that they can come to work and really add value. Thank you, Rob. Well-being, I'm pleased to say, is grounded in everything that we do here. We are very much Team Leeds, Be Well, with a really supported and positive offer of well-being. We have our people plan. We have our values and behaviours that were recently updated to incorporate health and safety. And we have our Be Your Best programme. All culminate in those shared values. Again, you matter. Come to work and be your best. Thank you, Rob. We have an awful lot to be proud of. We have a Team Leeds Be Well offer that we've had a hugely positive response to from colleagues. And I have put in your bundle in the report some case studies which are really positive. And actually, we had to be really choosy about putting them in because, if I'm honest, the occupational health team came with many. So we had to filter through, and what a great position to be in. We have had extensive senior colleague engagement. Well-being is a topic of conversation all the time. In particular, mental health, we are very aware of it. We have a stress policy in place, and we're committed to reviewing that actually next year. We have internal and external stakeholder conversations. We share best practice and we benchmark ourselves, in particular as a mindful employer. But we want to be better at that. We have good crisis support to support colleagues with a very good and dedicated mental health army, full of mental health first aiders and champions. We want to make that resource a little bit better, and we want to develop it so that it's pre-crisis. We do have mindful employer status, and we're seeing conversations, one-to-ones, appraisals. We are seeing the lifting of the stigma around mental health. Colleagues really now are beginning to feel safe to bring their best selves to work and say, no, actually, I'm not okay. And I really do need a little bit of help, and I need a bit of flexibility. And I'm pleased to say the response is, okay, what can we do to support you? We are definitely making a positive impact, and we're hearing stories of positivity all the time. Thank you, Rob. I haven't included any graphs in the presentation because I do appreciate that they are very difficult to see, and I will struggle to see them. So I have just made some bullet points for us. Mental health and depression are our top reasons for absence. Before 2022, our absence fluctuated, and it ranged between 9 and 10 days lost per FTE, but it stayed within that range. However, in 2022, it did increase, and it started to fluctuate between 10 and 12 days lost, and it peaked in July at 5,148 FTE days lost. We have started this year to see it come down. And I think that is a result of many contributory factors, including the great work the HR team have done on targeting the 12 priority areas. That's had a real positive effect. And actually a good story for that is LBS. They have worked incredibly hard and had lots and lots of positive outcomes. We do see seasonal variations, though. This year, July to April, we saw a decrease, but May to October, it has increased to the second highest actually in 12 months. In July. So we are seeing those seasonal variations, and it's important that we respond and reflect as an organisation to that and begin to unpick it. We haven't returned to pre-pandemic sickness levels, and at the moment we're fluctuating between 10 and 12. Next slide, please, Rob. This next slide is a really important slide for me and my work. We are a large organisation with a wide complex portfolio. So it's very, very difficult to make change from one position. We have to have a corporate stance, corporate guidance, and a corporate framework, but we really need to roll our sleeves up and drill down into services and directorates to support colleagues on the front line and support our managers respond compassionately, lead compassionately, and act compassionately. My priority areas are children's and families social care area, which is a 46.85% absence due to mental health and depression, followed by social care, which is adults and health, down to civic enterprise Leeds at 34, and ops and active Leeds, which is city development, then followed by housing, highways and transport, and down to environmental services. Those are my areas I am focusing on and talking about with our directors at this time. As an additional note, under the new framework and management system for health, safety and well-being, all of our directors have chosen mental health as one of their top priorities for next year. Next slide. Thank you, Rob, you're ahead of me. What colleagues have told us via our recent staff survey: workload continues to be a concern. Colleagues, they can get help and they do get the support they need. And really great news, they enjoy their jobs and they feel confident to speak up. And I work closely with Vanessa, our Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, and there's some brilliant work happening there. And again, that the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, our Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity head, and the wellbeing role, we all merging together, especially with our HR business partners. We've got to be a team working together all the time. Colleagues feel valued most. They value workload and feeling valued, and those two elements really influence their overall satisfaction of their job activities. We will continue to listen, reflect and respond. Next slide. Thank you, Rob. We do have an occupational health service, and part of our colleague support network is an employee support assistance package called VivUp. We know that colleagues find this very valuable, and what our data is telling us that colleagues do feedback positivity about our wellbeing offer, that the mental health first aiders and the champions are well used. We've got a really good uptake of colleagues using the Employee Assist programme. 49% of our colleagues who use it are signposted by their line managers. That's really, really positive action for us. Majority of colleagues are female who use it, but that is in line with our demographic. And majority colleagues who access it are currently still in work, which is a really, really good sign, because we know being in work is very, very good for our well-being. We have on average 300 calls to the VivUp counselling service per month. We have 200 counselling sessions held face-to-face, and we have 2,000 colleagues looking at our website for information. 87.5% of colleagues tell us that their counselling session made a positive difference to how they are feeling. We have a small occupational health team, but we are seeing 176 clients and customers, our colleagues, per month. 24% of these are connected to stress, depression and mental health. Colleagues from children's and families are the colleagues we see the most. Thank you, Rob. So we know what we're proud of, and we know what we've got happening within our organisation. And we absolutely know that we need to be better, and we want to be better. We need time now, I think, which is the period we're in, to reflect upon the work we have done, the good work that we have done, and think about our next steps. This is not unusual. This is very much in line nationally with responsible organisations, trying to think about how we navigate a post-pandemic world with well-being now as an absolute top priority, and how we support colleagues. Our next steps for us are setting a clear policy framework and management system based on HSG 65 with health and safety legislation, Plan, Do, Check, Act. What we tend to find when we have a more holistic culture, it's important we support it with a really robust system. We can't just have holistic everywhere. We've got to ensure that we manage and we deliver on expectations of our colleagues and support them properly. So we are implementing a really strong and robust policy and framework and the HSG 65 management system. This will cascade down into directorates and services so that we will have a plan. There is accountability, and the question of what are you doing about is asked, and it is answered appropriately with the right level of support. We want to continue listening, talking, bringing that be your best element in, and leading with focus, increasing our capability and capacity for managers to respond and make good and brave and confident decisions that have a positive impact upon their teams. And we want to encourage greater collaboration. We want to continue the support that we've got. The Be Well offer is exceptional, and we are now seeing greater engagement of that across the organisation. So let's continue with that. Managing mental health and sickness absence is something we really need to focus on over the next few months. I would like to unpick that and make sure that how we are behaving as an organisation really supports colleagues. So let's get ahead of it. Let's not wait for it to happen. But when it does happen, let's respond compassionately, caringly, and appropriately at a flexible rate that supports that colleague's recovery. Data capture, this is a big thing for me. My data capture is quite small at the moment. So my team is working very, very hard to look at different ways to collect both quantitative and qualitative data across the organisation, whether it's looking at mental health first aiders or looking at absence data. We need to know more in order to create an appropriate response and preventative management system. Thank you, Rob. Are we alone? And can we learn together? No, we're not alone. Mental Health Organisation UK tells us that 14.7% of UK employees experience mental health problems. Women in full-time work are twice as likely to suffer from mental health and depression as men in full-time work. 12.7% sickness absence in the UK is due to mental health. We are absolutely not alone, but we are determined that as a responsible organisation, we are committed to do something about it. It is a journey. This is not a solve tomorrow situation. But as long as we have that commitment, then I do believe that we will make a difference to every colleague. And another thing there that actually I nearly glossed over, which is a bit naughty, work-related stress. When I look at my peers externally, not many organisations are boldly stepping into the work-related stress space. And this is a legal space for us, and it's something we are taking very seriously. We want to be a healthy organisation, and we appreciate that how we behave and how we lead has a direct impact on our colleagues' well-being and mental health. So that is a space that we will focus on. How will we know if all this is working? Well, the top one for me is when we are using our stress policy and profile as a living document to help us navigate decisions as a council, as a leadership team, then I know that we are taking it seriously. So it's important we get that reviewed. Colleagues will feel more confident to manage their well-being and their mental health, to speak up, but say, what can I do to help and what can you do to help me? Managers having open and trusted conversations with their internal support network. It's really important, as I mentioned earlier, that we come together to join forces. The mental health first aiders and our champions are a huge resource for us, and they are valued by our colleagues. It's important that we bring them together as a stronger community, and we intend to do that. Sorry, Rob, could I go into the next slide? Thank you. And another thing for us, we know it's working when colleagues return to work sooner with reasonable adjustments. It isn't you're not in work or you're in work and you're healthy. There is a middle ground that we need to support. And that is with reasonable workplace adjustments and flexibility and communicating. When colleagues are away from work with sickness absence due to mental ill health, it's really important that our managers, who are our ambassadors, they are our conduit, our communications with colleagues, that they role model our values and behaviours and that they feel confident to manage a situation. Quite often, when supporting teammates with mental health problems, it's really, really scary. So it's important that our managers feel confident and competent to do the right thing. Next steps. Build a wellbeing management. Next slide, please, Rob, are we on? Thank you. Build a wellbeing management system and a framework, which we've already started developing, and that makes it more visible within the services. That's really important. It can't be a corporate offering and we talk about it at a corporate level. We've got to really have it visible and out there within our services for our colleagues. Deliver a roadshow on mental health and wellbeing awareness. This is something we're planning at the moment, covering supporting colleagues with
board members and officers. This is only a test alarm, so just be seated where you are. It's just going to go on for a few minutes. And we'd like to pause for a few minutes as well. Yes, Lisa. You can start.
Thank you. I thought that was a really clever way of shutting me up then. So roll out mental health and wellbeing toolkit. The wellbeing and mental health team are developing a really good toolkit which enables our colleagues to really drill down into their teams and support. Review sickness absence procedure to better support colleagues with mental illness and stress. making sure our communications are appropriate and don't add to the issue, but take it away. And hopefully come back to update you on the finer details of this. I think one of the thoughts at the end of this is it really is a breadthy piece of work. And if I were to take you through every element of it today, we would really be here till about 6 o'clock this evening. So I would like to get your steer on the approach, answer any questions you may have, and hopefully in the future come back and drill down a little bit for you. Thank you very, very much for your time. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, just before I open to questions, Mariana, do you have anything to add before I open the question to members for comments?
Only to say this is really important for us. I mean, it's great that Scrutiny Board have shown an interest. We are bringing this fairly early in the process. And we think Scrutiny Board can help with that development. And the only other thing I would add is, as I often bang on about here, the successful failure of this will be down to those 2,200 managers that we all talk about in terms of the Be Your Best programme. So just to reiterate, this is all being done within that broader context to try and make sure that it's effective in terms of implementation on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Mariana, and thank you, Andy and Lisa, for going through the presentation. Now I will open for any comments or questions to board members. I've got Councillor Bithell first, and I've got a few other members showing interest.
Thank you. Yeah, I stuck my hand up midway through. Such excitement. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of questions and comments. The first one on sort of the wording. I wonder whether we could move towards avoiding the term safe space and aiming for safer space, because actually there's nothing as an organisation we can do that in that moment won't mean somebody says something they shouldn't. It's about how we make it as safe as possible, and then once something may or may not happen, how we then deal with it. It feels like it's a false equivalency to say anything is a safe space. Have we got a plan around how we're going to train managers for when the response is I'm fine? I know some places have a sort of a rule that no one's allowed to answer with I'm fine, because actually it doesn't mean anything. And that's difficult, and it comes within a culture change in terms of that not just being a tokenistic thing, but if we're doing the work anyway, maybe that's something to consider. I wonder if we've done any work around letters that we send out when people are on sick with mental health conditions versus physical health, and how we bring people back quicker in terms of we don't add to the stress with the letters that we send. I wondered, and there are a lot of these, I do apologise. I wondered why we used a stethoscope for work-related stress. I realise it's just a logo, but if we're doing a process, it needs to be holistic. And I'm not convinced that many people that you listed are using stethoscopes. So I wonder if there's something that could be more closely aligned. Almost as it almost to me felt like, oh, actually, they don't know what we're dealing with, because does that make sense? Do we offer our mental health first aiders automatic counselling? Most counsellors get counselling from other counsellors in order that they can cope with the mental health stuff that they've dealt with. And then this is probably a larger one. Do we use, or are we planning on using, a trauma-informed leadership technique? In what capacity do we teach managers to use terms like I wonder, and that sort of pace, trauma-informed way of dealing with people? And do we ever actually give our colleagues an opportunity to disclose whether or not they have ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? Because actually the way that you would deal with a colleague who has openly stated they have ACEs is very different. When a manager says to me, or well, I don't have a manager anymore, but when I had a manager and they'd say to me things like, oh, can I speak to you at the end of the day? I would not, because of my ACEs, be able to cope with that. Because I automatically think I'm not good enough and they're there to tell me off. They might actually be saying, you've done a really great job on this piece of work, but I panic all day. So the way that we as managers respond in a trauma-informed way and give people the opportunity to disclose if they want to feels really important. And then I also just have a quick question on addiction and how we are planning on making sure that things like food addiction, which are a mental health condition, although not particularly effectively dealt with in the health system, How many times do our managers in a year think, oh, my team are a bit stressed, I'll bring in some donuts and we'll have a nice time. I do it myself, but actually we will have people living with food addiction and that will only be adding to it. So how do we ensure that the ways that we do it don't contribute, or we'll all go home now and have a glass of wine? That sort of commentary. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bithell. Is Andy going to pick up, or Lisa or Mariana? So
I'll make a start, and then when they come unstuck, I will ask Lisa to come in and answer some of the others. Thank you, Councillor Bithell. First issue is about the wording, absolutely. I think point taken, and we can certainly look at that and make that more specific and clearer. You rightly mentioned about training and development for our managers, and as Mariana and Lisa said, I think this rests and falls with our ability to support, train, guide our 2,200 managers, because they are the ones doing the support on a day-to-day basis, not myself or Lisa and her team. So certainly is our intention to strengthen and build upon the training and development offer for managers in this space. As you all know, over the last year or so, we've focused our management development on the EDI piece, but we're coming to the end of that programme, so we can now focus on other programmes, and obviously this will include this health, safety and wellbeing area. Your third issue is about the letters. You are right. There is more work to do on our correspondence and our engagement with individuals who are off sick, and how we frame that, particularly for those who are suffering from mental ill health. It's probably fair to say a lot of our correspondence is quite functional. So we are working with our HR and our business support centre colleagues to adapt and develop that. So that's certainly one of the things that we are working through. Your fourth issue is about the logo, absolutely. I can work with Lisa and colleagues on finding something that's perhaps more appropriate. I think your issue about the automatic counselling for our mental health first aiders, trauma-informed leadership techniques and addiction, I'm going to pass over to Lisa, because she might know more about these than I.
Councillor, I feel as though I might have to steal you for one morning to come down to the health, safety and wellbeing, because I think we are completely aligned. Our thoughts are absolutely in sync. Yes, our mental health first aiders are able to get counselling. Do they? No, I don't think they probably do at the moment, which is why we have a conference this month. We will be sharing this piece of work with them, and we will be working hard to bring them together and make sure they are supported. In fact, we were literally talking about this very matter on Friday afternoon. So thank you for raising that. Trauma-informed techniques. Again, it's something that we will develop as part of that management package. Managers are key to everything in a healthy organisation. We know that, we talk about it often. Understanding each other and being thoughtful is a general concept to leadership. But we do need to have those conversations with our managers to make them aware of our individualities, our nuances and our experiences. And I do believe that will be part of the package. It has to be, otherwise there is no point.
thank you. Councillor Bithell, do you have any supplementary question?
Just on the addiction, I guess, just to remind that also gets put into that management technique. The one with the glasses and people coming with their glass already 3/4 full is quite a good one, if you can stick that in the training. Thanks.
Thank you. Next one, I've got Councillor Parham, please.
Hello, Lisa. Thank you very much for that presentation. Very good. You're a newbie, but I'm even newer than you because I was elected in May. So I'm very new. As well as being a councillor, I'm also a men's suicide prevention worker, and I'm a long time learning disability person as well. So I've just got a few comments, all positive, and then just an open-ended question for you about going forward. So as a support worker, I've been a spy on the wall at Lotherton Park, taking someone to volunteer there regularly. And I've got to say, the staff, the manager there, and how he interacted with his team, he didn't know me at all. I was observing. He was exceptional. consistently excellent with his staff, a small team, and the volunteer. So it's working in practice. That's what I'm going to say. Secondly, the case study about the worker who had spent time in the Becklin. I've had a close family member of mine spend time in the Becklin, and to be able to think that somebody like the person close to me and that worker had the level of support, I think it's exceptional. It's wonderful, right? So I want to just say that I'm, as a suicide prevention officer, worker rather, and someone who is a director of a small charity in the third sector, I'm very, very impressed, and I'm pleased that the way things are going. So the other thing that you mentioned during your presentation is that you're very keen to capture things before they go to crisis, so pre-crisis, and I think that's a really good thing as well. So really, my question is, coming from the third sector myself, I see lots of little small groups, and they're doing great things. I can probably write a line about mine, but there are other good things. So I'm just wondering, in order to capture that pre-crisis situation, are there any ideas that you're working on or thinking about at the moment that you might be able to tell us about? Anything in the pipeline, possibly? And I'm acutely aware of the financial pressures.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all that positive feedback. That's wonderful to hear, that is indeed happening in practice. We do have some ideas, but we are in the very early stages. As I say, we have a conference this month with the mental health first aiders, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their ideas. They know better than me. And I think that it's about gathering that and understanding it, and together formulating a way forward. If you do have any ideas, you're clearly very experienced, then please do. If you would be willing to share with us, we are always open to learning, because it is very much a team Leeds effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Do you have any supplementary questions, Councillor? No, thank you. Next one is Councillor Chapman, please.
Thank you. It's probably a question about how we can try to prevent some of this arising in the first place. Have we given any consideration to a 4-day week? The council still works obviously a 5-day week, but we spread the hours over a 4-day week, and what impact that might have in improving people's stress and work-related stress. And if we haven't looked at that yet, have we looked at any research across the companies that have been trialling it out?
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. We have briefly looked at this, and colleagues will be aware that there are a couple of local authorities that have also piloted it over the last year or so. We're not actively pursuing the 4-day week here at Leeds. However, colleagues will know that during the COVID period and thereafter, we did introduce fairly robust hybrid working principles, which have built-in flexibility in the workplace to enable individuals to work with their managers and their teams creatively and effectively to ensure they can deliver service delivery, but also to build in some flexibility, because as you rightly suggest, that can actually have quite a positive impact on people's working environment and their mental health. From the outcome from the staff survey and anecdotally and work we do with managers, we know that is working. There's more to do, and we've very recently refreshed those hybrid working principles based on feedback from the staff survey. So our approach at the moment is to focus on that and see where that gets us over the next 6 months.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Chapman, do you have a follow-up question? Thank you. I've got next Councillor Burke, then I've got Councillor Kitchener.
Thank you, Chair. We seem to be kind of putting our credentials on the table, so I feel I should. I'm a qualified counsellor registered with BCAP. I'm Ofqual accredited to deliver a range of mental health suicide prevention courses up to and including level 4. I also founded and run a small mental health charity, so that gives you a flavour of how interested I am in this. Couple of things jump out at me, not particularly what you said, but reading the report, and it's the mixture, the overlay of well-being and mental health. Now, there is synergy between the two, but I think it's incredibly important that the term mental ill health, or mental fitness, I prefer, is not subsumed by the term well-being. They are very, very different. And increasingly, organisations are using well-being, which is fabulous, to mirror, to mask, to overlay the fact that we have the royal we, real mental health problems. Throughout all the report, we talk about stress and depression, and then mental health, which is kind of confusing to me, because we should be paying attention to every single condition that would impact on someone's mental health. So to just focus on two, and they may be the two that are most often reported, but certainly there's lots. Stigma, you talk about tackling the stigma, and I'll share a publication we put together last week with you after the meeting. I'm just interested to know how you will tackle that, because that's huge. There's a whole thing around cultural awareness, which I think is missing, because cultural awareness, and I don't mean based on race, I mean cultural awareness in its purest sense. So all the groups that are there already, I feel will have a different take on what affects their members of those groups. The mental health resource you're developing, I would very much welcome having sight of that. I'd also, and I can't speak for any of my colleagues, I would love to come to your first aider conference and contribute to that as well. You talk, there's some sweeping details. I'm sorry, I'm perhaps not as positive as the rest. Those who know me know that's normally the case. We talk about preventing unnecessary work-related stress. I'd really like some detail around that, because some work-related stress is actually positive, isn't it, and necessary. And the only way we'll get rid of that is to stop people coming to work. But I'd like to know how we're going to do that, particularly in light of the current financial situation. So we talk to people who are under real stress, given workloads and lack of colleagues to do support for them. That's probably enough for now. Just one more thing. Yeah, that's enough. Just one more thing. Okay. We're saying we're maintaining our statement, our status as an actful, mindful employer. I want to know what that's actually going to look like in its development, because talk about developing, but the devil's always in the detail, isn't it? So how will we, and I think part of that is capturing voice, isn't it? So lived experience voice is absolutely crucial, because it's really easy to make assumptions, particularly about mental health, when it's a personal journey for everyone. And just to end on a positive, I've been doing some work outside of the council with a council employee who I'll definitely won't name, but I will talk to you privately. And he has struggled to get help within the council for a long time. He's now in rehab, which is fantastic. The council has allowed him time off, but he came to me because he had tried to take his own life twice, but now he's in rehab. So perhaps when he comes back, that lived experience is a really good avenue for getting information.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. And is it Alicia or Andy going to pick up?
Thank you so much. I'm still absorbing it, but thank you so much. Firstly, I'm so sorry to hear about the colleague you've just mentioned, and absolutely, we would welcome any experience, advice, feedback. Of course we would, because that's going to help us grow. I thank you very much also for your very kind offer to be involved in the conference. I welcome any support, because we're learning all the time, as you know. Work-related stress is a big issue, and it's something we need to be responsible with. And and we need to take it seriously because it is a risk that we need to treat as a health and safety risk. It sits within health and safety legislation, and that's how we need to manage it. I echo your thoughts about the bringing together of everything that's really quite challenging under the wellbeing banner. I really see that happening a lot, and we do need to separate it. And so, for example, one way I've started that is that we now have a mental health advisor within the corporate health, safety and wellbeing team. He is not wellbeing, he is mental health. And he will start to unpick what that looks like to give us that independent focus and drive. We can't muddy the waters on this. We've got to be really clear about what our commitment is, the direction of travel and what we want to achieve. But we will only get to that if we collaborate, and that's why your feedback and steer is so, it doesn't always have to be positive, of course not. It's going to help us all the time. So I'm very grateful for you for giving that feedback. Cultural awareness, I am sorry it is missing from the report. It is just dug down a little bit deeper in my strategy, and I should have mentioned it. It is something that is very, very high on my priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And Councillor Burke, do you have any supplementary question?
Thank you. And I'm sure I'm speaking for some of my colleagues. I'm staring at you, Anna, who would perhaps like to come to the conference as well.
All the time in the world.
We can make time. Just one last. It's really heartening to hear you say that you have mental health professionals. That's fantastic news. It's just the report says that it is going to be merged, which made my alarm bells start to kind of go off. So are we saying it's not going to be merged, or it is going to be merged with a mental health lead over here and a welfare lead over there?
He will be mental health, a mental health advisor, but he reports into my wellbeing manager. So he sits within the occupational health team and the health and safety team.
Thank you, Lisa. I've got Councillor Kitcher and then I'll Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Hello there. The pandemic's been bad for us all, but I do think the children have suffered. And thinking about, I'm a children's champion, so I'm around children a lot, but it's more of an observation. It's not a question. I think you're doing fantastic work. You know, I agree there. Brilliant. But I was at the children's champion where we had 12 children who were year 6. So they are 10, 11-year-old. And they all bring a manifesto of what they want to go ahead. Out of that 12, there was one who spoke about something which was climate change. All the rest was mental health. Now, for a child at that age, when they should be thinking about excitement, going to high school, I'm going to be playing football, I'm going to be dancing and what have you, it's just a real big, it just hit me in my heart. And I'm sure other people felt the same way. I do think, you know, we talk about adults, but it's across the board, isn't it? You know, the teachers at the schools, people working in children's with children. It's all stress, and it's all so the support is so needed. So I think you are addressing it right, and I'd just like to say well done. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Kitcher. Mariana.
Maybe if I just come on that one, thanks, Councillor Kidju. Completely recognise that, and it is heartbreaking. I guess in terms of the purpose of this kind of report and this board, it's probably slightly outside of scope, but you may well have read the annual Director of Public Health report that was at I think it was September's or July's exec board, which was focused on that, and I think that's Health and Active Lifestyles, I think it is, Rob will correct me if I'm wrong, which Scrutiny board is picking that up, but it is picking that up. This is really us focused as an employer. So, and much as we'd love to employ the children's mayor, I don't think we would be allowed to do.
Thank you, Mariana. Councillor Hinchcliffe, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. I really appreciate the depth and detail, and to the committee actually and the scrutiny board for letting us discuss these issues quite a lot in recent months. One focus of mine in my ward, I've recently started a menopause cafe for women that suffer from mental health issues and physical health issues as a result of the menopause, and the stats that you point to on the gender balance are quite stark. So I wondered if, and it's been lumped in the report next to financial well-being and other issues that aren't necessarily related. So I just wondered if there are any bespoke services for people suffering from the menopause, and whether you would consider taking a cafe up.
Thank you very much. That's a really, really topical and very valuable question. Yes, we would, obviously. We do have support for menopause, those experiencing menopause. And in fact, we're just at the moment reviewing our policy to make sure it's aligned and everything that it should be. And we do have guidance for colleagues. It's a topic I discuss regularly with our trade union colleagues as well. And we're all very passionate about it. I think there are, when we look at the VivUp access, colleagues who are accessing VivUp, I mentioned it in the presentation, the majority are women. And that does align with our demographic, but I do think it is wise to understand and reflect upon all those issues. And that is absolutely an issue we're seeing an awful lot of. And we are very supportive of that, and quite rightly so.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor, do you want to come back or follow up?
Thanks for that. Yeah, any specific briefings in writing or whatever could be really useful on that topic. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Faith and Councillor Bithell back again.
Thank you very much, Chair. And further to this healthy discussion, I just wanted to ask a specific question about the data that was provided in the presentation, because one of those that was mentioned was the fact of adults and health being the largest amount of issues in terms of problems that we're having to deal with. But then there wasn't a correlation between the largest amount of people coming from certain departments then looking at the website or accessing services. And I just wondered whether any particular work has been done around that to make sure why that is the case, why one is so high, but then at the same time is not the one accessing the services.
Thank you. The priority service for me actually is children's and families, the social work sector. Service within children's and families, followed secondly by adults and health. The adults and health do have it as a priority. We don't section out our VivUp to directorate specific. Again, when we talk about reviewing our data and making it more meaningful and matter, that's one of the things we will do moving forward. But I will go through that data and unpick it so that I can give you a more thorough answer.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Firth, you want to come back?
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Chair. I think it's just really an interesting correlation between the fact that actually colleagues that are working in this space already are then actually potentially not then coming through the process. And it's not saying that they're absolute saviours and being able to support themselves. It's actually, is there a particular reason why that's the case, and actually why we can't take it forward? And that leads into a second question, which has been something that is regularly raised across this board in the past, which is to do with working from home. Those two departments that you just mentioned are largely out in the field, so it doesn't really affect them as much. But I just wanted to ask, in terms of we have a number of particularly younger and also newer members of staff that are coming through and starting their careers with the council, and how are we embedding with them their mental health support, given the fact that they may not have as much FaceTime or otherwise practical experience with their line managers or people that they want to learn from.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Lisa, do you want to pick up, or Andy?
Thank you. Again, a really warranted question and a very real question for our times, I think. I think working flexibly is a good thing. I think it supports colleagues appropriately and enables us all to have that flexibility and often that work-life balance a little bit better. But it does come with some risks, especially around health, safety and well-being and mental health, which is isolation. So I think it is so important that our managers know to keep in touch, keep talking, and that's a manager's responsibility and it's a team member's responsibility. We all have to take responsibility for that, knowing that's how we work. We do have some work in under development around working safely with computers and working safely wherever you are working, and that is one of our key focuses within that space.
Thank you for that, Lisa. I think that the big thing is that when we've been looking at all of the staff surveys in the past, there has been a general decline or a sort of a plateau in terms of people feeling that they are happy in terms of the work. And it's actually slightly declined, I believe, ever so slightly from what it was just after the pandemic. And I think that it'd be very interesting to see in future staff surveys, if we can pull out that data, what sort of age range that actually is looking at and what sort of level, if we can pull out that data, those individuals are and how they're affected across the different streams, simply because ultimately they may be on a very different track to those who are established members of staff. And I certainly think that that's a really key area. We need to make sure that if we want the sustainable workforce of the future at this council, that we definitely have people that feel that they're having the opportunities they deserve, as well as the support, as we talk about here, with mental health. Thank you very much anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Firth. I do completely agree. So as colleagues know, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years now, we have asked our workforce about 6 times in terms of that question about, do you feel happy and do you feel supported? And we know that there is about 15% of our workforce are reporting back that they are unhappy, not necessarily in the workplace, but generally in life. And that number has stayed roughly the same. I mean, you are right that I think it did slightly increase when we asked this time around in the staff survey. So it is really important for us to understand, who they are, why they are expressing anxiety and concern, and what we can do as an employer to support them. So there is something there about the data analysis and the number crunching that you rightly mentioned. We are very mindful about individuals who start with us during COVID and post-COVID, where perhaps that normal working environment with people working around you isn't as forthcoming. So we do need to be very mindful about that. And also we are committed to continuing to engage with our staff and colleagues in terms of where that trend shifts. So it has plateaued, but we need to keep doing that data analysis. And then particularly, as Lisa says, targeting in areas where we know it is more problematic, or different demographics where we know it's more of a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I've got Councillor Bithell and Councillor Thompson. Those are the last questions to be asked.
Thanks, Chair. Just to come back around menopause, I wonder if we're going to really take it seriously, whether it's time to create a menopause staff network and actually give it the same level of credence, I guess, and space, that there's a proper menopause staff network chair and things that we can utilise. Also, if we're going to be discussing around menopause, I have the request to make sure it's trans inclusive, because actually a lot of our trans colleagues will go through early menopause because of the hormone replacement therapy that you go through as a trans person, or can go through as a trans person, is more accurate. And then in terms of the relatively cheap options for embedding well-being, I wonder if there's some work that could be done around meditation. And I can't even imagine myself 2 years ago saying this. What a changed human I am. But is there a could we have a sort of meditation of the week on something like Insight Timer, where they're free apps, other apps are available, that we support colleagues to do within the work day? So actually, because one of the things that a lot of people say around meditation is actually it doesn't fit in with my life, because as soon as I finish work, I'm picking up kids and doing X, Y, Z. But actually a 3-minute meditation that you're supported to do within a work day can make a big difference, and it becomes something that then everyone's culturally doing. It'll take a little while, I would imagine, to embed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bithell. We're certainly happy to have that conversation with the Women's Voice Staff Network. So that's a staff network that we work closely with when working on the menopause support. So as Lisa's already said, we have that toolkit working with trade unions on the policy. We just launched a few YouTube videos on it, obviously in readiness for Wednesday, which is World Menopause Day. So we're happy to have the conversation with that staff network to see whether or not there is merit in a very specific group who can really work with us on this issue. In terms of the meditation and the apps and using technology, again, certainly something that we are prepared to have a look at and pursue. When working with managers more generally in terms of that issue about working pattern and workload and support, we do give them some support and guidance as to flexing and managing workload. So when the time is right to have time away from the workplace, making sure they have appropriate breaks. And I think really what you're saying is that there is more support in terms of giving them access to what they do during that time away, those breaks. And we can certainly learn and adopt different ways and means of doing that. So happy to work with Lisa and colleagues on that.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm necessarily saying that we should suggest what they do during breaks. Actually, I think I'm saying that actually taking 3 minutes out of the workday would, I mean, from a purely commercial point of view, would actually make people more productive anyway. So we'd save those 3 minutes plus an extra 9 or whatever it is. I don't know, the research is out there. I haven't done it. The other thing is around the menopause, again, just to re-clarify, so as LGBT plus champion, it's my role to advocate on behalf of our LGBT plus community members. And as soon as we say, actually, we'll go and speak straight to the women's staff network, we're already ignoring anyone with any gender variance. I think they absolutely have a place around defining it, but they aren't the only people that are struggling with the menopause. And the narrative that we have at the moment in this country around who is struggling with the menopause, it being that particular demographic of that particular women, it's particularly white in its narrative. It's particularly doesn't look into people who have surgery and therefore have an early menopause. It's such a wide thing that actually I worry that if we pigeonhole ourselves and then they say, oh no, we can cover that, we're then re-pigeonholing ourselves to that majority narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. I was just reflecting as we were talking about menopause there. I think I don't want to isolate menopause because it is one of life's experiences for many people. But I was just sitting and reflecting that actually I think menopause is owned by everybody and experienced by everybody. And I think if you were to ask my husband, does he experience menopause? I can tell you he absolutely does. And so I think it is a lesson for everyone. It is an awareness for everyone. It is not gender specific. It is about us all coming together and understanding each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Councillor Bethel. I've got Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's encouraging to see on the council guidance that straight away it talks about an inclusive approach. I think it may be worth talking to the combined authority about the work they're doing because they have a very clear strategy and I think a working group. I've been sent some information but I haven't dug into it yet. But if they're doing that, it probably makes sense to connect up if that's not already happening, which it may be. And yeah, the early understanding and information is really important, especially for those who've gone through surgery or other challenges that bring on menopause earlier. And just a question on a slightly different aspect. Do we have supervision in place for managers who are supporting colleagues? So going back to the mental health first aiders and whether they have access to supervision, is there also access to that kind of supervision for managers who are dealing with colleagues in difficult circumstances to make sure they have the support they need? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Just in terms of your first question, as far as I know, we haven't recently spoken to the combined authority about this, so thank you. We will reach out to them. What we do though is we do share quite a bit with our anchor institutions in the city. So we've got a really good practice of sharing. So we can add that to that community. So hopefully that will help. In terms of supervision, I will pass you over to Lisa, who may be able to help.
Thank you very much. With regards supervision, do you mean managerial supervision, leadership supervision, or counselling, really?
More the kind of
Yes,
counselling.
okay,
supervision.
thank you. I thought that would be the case. So our managers actually have a really good, strong peer group of support between HR business partners, their peer group within their management setting and their team, health, safety, well-being advisors, and our occupational health service. So we really do come together to support and help set them up for success. Our managers can access that support, but also they can access the VivUp counselling service. Just as we spoke earlier about mental health first aiders having trauma support, it marries into the same as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Thompson, do you have any supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. I've got some contact details from the Combined Authority from someone who I spoke to about their group, so I'll pass that on if that's. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one question actually. How much have we seen the impact of the cost of living crisis affecting our staff and absence? Is there any data on this, please?
It's a really good question. It's quite hard to be specific about the causal relationship between things like attendance management or our metrics in the staff survey. We did ask quite a lot of open questions, free text questions. So people in the staff survey, which is our most recent engagement exercise, people did make quite a lot of comment about how they were feeling more generally in terms of cost of living and pressure in their personal and working environment. So we're still doing the number crunching on that, but it is quite difficult to really narrow down and be very specific about the cost of living impact on some of the issues that we've raised. But we do know that it is having an impact. We do know that our members of staff do reference it and mention it. The scale of it is quite hard to quantify, though.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Lisa. And once again, thanks, Andy, and to Mariana for answering our questions. The recommendation on page 16 of our agenda pack asks us to note the content of the report and ongoing work, as well as any further action that might arise from this item. Do you think that we need an update, workload, and how we are managing might help in February, March 2024? Do you reckon we should bring the report back in? Yeah. Are you comfortable to bring the report back in February or March?
It isn't working. Yes, I am, absolutely. But I would like to make a recommendation, just picking up some of our points about blending together. It might be a better session if we focus on one. So let's talk about well-being, or let's talk about mental health. Let's not try and cloud it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you can stop. Hannah, okay.
I think that's a great recommendation, but if that's the case, can we bring back both on separate sessions? Because actually both of them are important.
Yeah.
And also it would be really helpful if you're happy to produce it, to do sort of a you said we did from this panel, so that we can see what's been actioned. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Yeah. Okay. So now we move. You can stay if you want to, and if you want to. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we now moving on to item 8, which is the month for financial report item, and I'd like to ask Victoria to introduce the report, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We're going to cover both items 8 and 9 together because they're quite intricate, because they're interlinked, because obviously what impacts on 2023-24 has an ongoing impact on the medium-term financial strategy. So we're going to bring them together. As you know, there's been a lot of briefings on the current financial year, the trajectory of where we're moving, and also around the medium-term financial strategy. So today I'm just going to cover the key points that are in the report that was considered at September Executive Board, which will, sorry Rob, if you go on to the next slide, thank you, which will cover both the financial challenge for 23-24, and the work that's been undertaken around that position. And then looking at the medium-term financial strategy across the next 5 years, looking at the budget gaps that we've got over that period, the risks and assumptions in the budget, because we're working with a lot of unknowns at the moment, and one of them being the pay award for this financial year still hasn't been settled at the moment, so that has a knock-on impact both for this year and for future years. And then the work that we're undertaking so that we achieve a balanced budget for next year, 24-25. And then just some key highlights on the other things that are considered within the medium-term financial strategy that have an impact on obviously the housing revenue account, on our tenants, and then the dedicated schools grant, and then for capital. Okay, I'm happy to take questions in between if that will be easier. What's best for you, Chair? Just because we're taking the 2 items.
I think let's do the question at the end. That's better.
Sorry, I didn't realise it clicked off. Sorry. Rob, can we just move on to 23-24 then, please? And the financial position that we've reported to September Executive Board. Now, as you can see from this position, children's and families are currently projecting 27.8 million overspend. Now, that's mainly due to the number of children in the looked after part of the service, and we're seeing that significant increase in the numbers of children who are requiring our care, but then obviously as well around where we're placing those children and the cost of that placement. It's significantly increased over the last 2 years, so it's doubled from what we were paying 2 years ago for an external placement, which is causing the pressure that we're seeing. But also children are needing additional support following obviously COVID, coming out of COVID, with the 2 years that we had where children were isolated and are presenting themselves with more complex needs, but also around those education, health and care plans where we're seeing the numbers of children who are having those education, health and care plans significantly as well increasing, which is putting a pressure on both the service and the transport provision around children's and families. Now, you'll see in the national press, this is a national issue. It's not something that's just relative to Leeds, but actually it's something that we are having to deal with because it's a real issue for us as a local authority. And we're not hearing that there'll be any additional funding for this year, so we need to manage that position for us. We are seeing pressures in the other areas of the service. So for communities, housing and environment, that's mainly around the additional requirements that we've had around waste, around the new requirements on POPs, around the pollutants, on disposing of things like settees, etc., where there's this covering that have to be disposed of separately, and also in strategy and resources, mainly around those civic enterprise Leeds areas, and also around the pay award. So we're seeing that in the majority of the areas across the directorates. So we recognised this position quite early through the summer when we did a lot of work on the trajectory of where the overspend was occurring and the action that we needed to take. And therefore, we've put in some controls in place to stop non-essential spend. So that communication's been out to staff. We've reinforced that in a lot of different communication methods. And we're doing a review at the moment of what's still coming through and whether that is essential spend. And we are advising on stopping that. We're also looking at purchase cards, which is a means by how people do actually spend, and looking around that expenditure that's going through there, and again questioning whether it's essential and advising that it needs to stop. We've done quite a bit of work around those highest cost areas, and we've been putting in what we've called task and finish groups around those. So around the children's services, around fleets, around Leeds building services, to look at if there's anything we can do to pull those costs in, although we are seeing significant inflationary pressures within those areas and also increased demand for services, which is impacting on the cost, especially around fleets. We have put a recruitment freeze on, and those controls around that have been strengthened over the last couple of months, and we're just working through that with directorates. We have looked at fees and charges and the amount that we've charged for our services, and we're doing another review of that to see if there's anything further we can do. And we've got a review of the assets that the council owns, looking at how we can move out of some of the assets that we do have and to free those up for sale. And then we are looking at the savings that we're proposing for next year and whether any of those can be brought forward into this year. So that review is currently underway. So there's an awful lot of work going on at the moment, both for this financial year, but as well for next year to be able to set a balanced budget. We have reiterated a number of key messages to all staff, and these have been going out in comms on a regular basis. The main one is to stay within your budget, and so therefore making sure that we have robust monitoring and don't spend it unless it's necessary. So if your budget is overspending, please don't spend it, because we require that for the rest of the council. And then to look at how your pressures are coming through and if you can absorb those in year. We've highlighted the issues early, so that's something, but if you're aware of anything new, to let us know as soon as you can, because as soon as we know about it, we can start dealing with it. And therefore, that's meant that we've had robust monitoring, and we've been reporting to Executive Board on a monthly basis on that position. So if we just move on, so that's where we are for 23-24 and the financial position. There is going to be further reports, and we've got Executive Board this week, which will then come to scrutiny, and we'll be going in November and December. So we're monitoring that position very, very closely and taking corrective action around that. So moving on to the financial challenge, which covers 24-25 to 26-27, which is the 3 years that we're concentrating around the savings programme. But the medium-term financial strategy does cover 5 years, so that we've always got an eye on the future. So within that strategy, there are a number of challenges. Obviously, we're all facing nationally the increase in children's, but we're also seeing an increase in social care generally, and the other services that we provide that where members of the public require support. And we're having to deal with the increased demand through austerity, the cost of living crisis. And the cost of living does affect the council. So our goods and services that we purchase, our inflation, we've seen significantly increase. Inflation stayed higher for longer, which is having an impact. And also the Bank of England rates are higher than we'd forecast, and that's having an impact on our level of borrowing. Although the Treasury Management team do look for opportunities still in that borrowing to keep rates as low as possible. We haven't at the moment had the settlement. We usually get that settlement in December, which is quite late. So we have to make sure that we set the budget, or we start to look at the budget and what we need to do based on assumptions. So looking at through that period, what we have identified through the processes that we need to reset as a council. Sorry, Rob, do you want to go back one? Sorry. Go back a couple. Sorry. There, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so as we had a look at the financial position, we know that from the resources that we've got available, we are going to have to make some hard decisions and reset what the council can actually fulfil. And that's some of the work that we are looking at the moment. We are looking at the Best City ambition and what we need to do to make sure that we focus our resources on those areas that are high priority for the council. Look at those that are statutory, making sure that we're fulfilling that statutory role and that we're still investing in prevention. because if we don't do that, that obviously has an impact on if we don't prevent people needing higher cost services, the costs escalate over the future years. So we're really looking at that. And that's how we're focusing the delivery of the savings and highlighting those areas. We're looking at the way that we do that. So we're working across council, both with all officers and members, to make sure that we have that team leads approach in how we deliver those services. And we're looking at working with partners. So Marianne, as she said, she's gone off to another meeting and she'll be coming back later, around working with those partners around how we work together around the services that we need to provide to our communities, and looking at opportunities around securing income. So is there any grants funding that we can access? Is there any further contributions, etc.? And as I've said, we're really looking at the organisational shape of the council and making sure that we do that in line with design principles, and that we are as effective as we can do. We maximise automation and we look at that productivity. And we know through the staff surveys we've been discussing that staff are finding that workloads are high. So how we look at the way that we deliver our services to reduce that workload pressure, but within the financial envelope that we've got available. So a lot of work's being undertaken. So Rob, if we move on to the next slide, around the medium-term financial strategy, around the medium-term financial strategy, around the capital programme. So we've reviewed all the schemes within the capital programme and made sure that they're still what we need to invest in for the council over the next 10 years. We've done a complete review, which I'll go through in a moment, and we've had a principle that we would only invest in the capital programme for the amount that we've actually repaid off in debt, so that we're keeping the level of debt at the same level. And we've been working on the financial challenge, which is in progress at the moment, where we're identifying savings proposals that some are being considered at executive board tomorrow, and then further ones will come to executive board in October, and then through to yourselves as scrutiny. So from the medium-term financial strategy, we identified a budget gap over the next 3 years of 162.8 million. We've smoothed that position because it was quite an increase in 24-25. It was 79.2 million, but we've smoothed that over the 3 years to recognise that to take 79 million out of the budget next year would mean that we were nearly on a cliff edge. So we've felt that it's more prudent and sustainable for the council if we smooth it across those years. But obviously there's still a lot of work to do to be able to balance that position. So if we just move on to the next slide. So as I've talked about, there's a lot of risks in the medium-term financial strategy that we're managing at the moment. Obviously, those economic and social risks. So as we're seeing our demand for services increase, we're also grappling with the economic position, where we're going to be with inflation, where we're going to be with interest rates. We obviously know about the wars that are happening. What will be the impact on the economy going forward? So we're trying our best to look and what that impact will be and to build that into the medium-term financial strategy. I've talked about the funding. We'll be dealing with a lot of uncertainty around the level of funding that we receive and those different grants and whether they'll continue. We have seen energy inflation come down, but we are seeing fuel going back up. You know, the oil prices are starting to increase again. So we're having to review that strategy to make sure that when we do set the budget, we've got those assumptions as at that time, but they do move very quickly. And that's why sometimes we see the position moving away from us. As I've said, the pay award for this year hasn't been agreed yet, and we're not even started in future years. So we have to make an estimate of what that would be. And I've talked about the resources. The interest rates is an interesting one to see where they're going to be, where they're going to land, what are the decisions of the Bank of England. That has an impact on us. We also have some loans outstanding, and whether they get called in will again have an impact on the council. Talked about the demand and demography. We obviously expect there to be an election next year, and what that political landscape will look like, especially around for local government. And then I've had to make, as I've gone through, quite a number of assumptions around the capital programme. So the assumptions in the 24-25 budget, which is the one that we're balancing for next year, is that all the savings would be achieved in this year. And that means that any that aren't achieved and are not going to be delivered the year after will have an impact on that position. But that is the current assumption. And we're working with directorates around how the delivery of those savings will happen either this year or next year. We've looked at the general income and we've made assumptions around the amount of funding that we're going to get from central government. We've made assumptions around the business rate increases. So what we think that CPI will be in September. We've made assumptions around whether government will freeze the increase for businesses and also the growth in the city around whether we'll generate new business rates. We've made similar assumptions around council tax. We've assumed that government will keep the cap at 2.99% for general and 1.99% for adult social care. If they lift that cap, that will give us some additional income if we choose to increase council tax. And we've had to make assumptions around how we think the council tax base will grow over that period. We've also had to make assumptions around where we think collection's going to be of business rates and council tax this year and the impact that will have on the collection fund. So we've built those into the MTFS. Those assumptions are being reviewed again now, ready for the December report. We've also looked at the pressures across all directorates. So we've obviously assumed the pay increase would be 4% for next year. If it's higher than that, that will create a pressure, but that's the assumption we've made at the moment. And we've assumed that a level for the real living wage would be the national living wage plus £1. We're waiting for those announcements. We've built in inflation based on where we were at September and what we're expecting that to be, and the impact that that'll have around energy and fuel. We've had to make assumptions where we think the trajectory is going to be, especially around children's and children looked after over the next few years, if we see the increase that we're having at the moment, and also the cost of those placements. We've made assumptions around that, which we are reviewing at the moment. And we've made assumptions around the debt position, so what we think our level of debt will be. So there is a lot of work going on, as I've said, to close the gap. We have a cross-council savings programme while directorates look themselves inwardly at their services and what they can provide. We've also looked at ways that we can identify how we reduce costs and generate more income. So reducing the costs, as I've said, through automation, through looking around how we deliver services. Do we need to deliver everything in the same level that we currently do? And also those opportunities, is there anywhere where we're not charging that others do and maybe we should be? And also looking around whether we collect all the income that's due to the council. We did issue a section 188, around on the 10th of October around the potential need to make redundancies, and Andy can go into that in more detail if you want him to. We have done proposals for October Executive Board. So at the moment, they're classified as business as usual proposals. So these are things that the directors can just get on and do. And we've identified about 13.4 million of those, but they're going to Executive Board on Wednesday. And then, as I've said, further savings will go in December. We have done a lot of briefings with staff, with members, with senior teams and other stakeholders across the council, so that everybody's aware of the financial position and what we're striving to achieve to make sure that we are in a position where we can set a balanced budget in February. So just quickly looking at the other key medium-term financial strategy areas that we cover within that strategy. So the first is the housing revenue account, and this affects our housing tenants. And this is where we've projected, based on estimates of where we currently are, that we would have a budget gap of 16 million over the next 5 years, with a gap for next year of 1.9. 1.9 million. So that assumes that rent and service charges would increase by 7%. I would say no decisions made yet. It's not made until full council. We've assumed a level of the pay award, but that does have an impact the same for the HRA as it does for the general fund. And that impact is at 2.5 million. We have increased the repairs amount. So this is the how much that we need to put aside for repairs, and we've put in an extra 3.2 million, which means that we've got 67 million for repairs. We've also increased the revenue contribution to the capital programme so that we can spend more on those houses, and that's looking at that we're increasing that by a further 5 million. And then because of interest rates are affecting the general fund, they also affect the HRA. So we've put in additional for borrowing of 1.6 million, and then we have to pay the unitary charges. So that's where we are, the key assumptions within the housing revenue account. For the dedicated schools grant, this is allocated by the Education Skills and Funding Agency, and they provide it for 4 funding blocks for the council. So this is for schools, those high needs areas, which are mainly those with special education needs, our early years, and then our central school services, which are provided by the council. So the forecast is that we're going to receive about 1.68 billion over the next 3 years. The projections are that deemed will increase at a higher rate than what our funding is that we will receive. So we will have a gap over that period, so that we need to have a look at how we manage that gap, as we are doing with the general fund services, and working with the schools again around how they reduce their funding so that DSG deficit doesn't increase, so that it's not manageable over that period. It is in line with the national trends that there is pressure within dedicated schools grants, and that schools are having to reduce, as we are, in their funding allocations that's available for them across those different blocks. But we are working hard to manage that, and so that we can take early action. So just quickly moving on to the capital programme, what we've done is calculated, and this is quite a technical piece, but we've calculated how much we actually pay off for our borrowing through the minimum revenue provision that we set aside, and how much we have for corporate borrowing for the annual programmes. The amount that's left then is the headroom that we paid off that we can use to fund more schemes within the capital programme. We then had some money set aside in contingencies that we've added to that, and then so that we can put a contingency aside for future years. We've taken that off, and then we've used some SIL funding to give us total funds available of just short of 32 million. So the schemes that have been put forward are on the next slide, and those just show the areas that we are still going to be investing in, although we don't have a lot of funding available. Now, those schemes are mainly around where there's a health and safety issue. Obviously, like, for example, like the disabled facilities grant, that's to enable people to stay safely in their own homes. We've got issues around the works that we need to undertake to make sure that the buildings are watertight and are safe for the future. So just looking at that, the capital programme on the next slide is updated, and it's a 10-year capital programme, and this is so that we've always got a view on the future. For those annual programmes, so these are things that happen every year. Over that 10-year period, we're investing 822 million. And we are investing 312.8 million on highways maintenance across that period, with just over half of that funded externally. We do need to invest in the PFI, and we have invested quite a lot for transformation, because we know that we've got to transform the way that we deliver those services. And we also use capital receipts for funding both that transformation and also capital expenditure. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover this morning, Chair. So just open it out to any questions.
Thank you, Victoria, for the running through the presentation and report on item 8 and 9 together. Any comments from the board members? Yes, Councillor Firth first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Victoria, for that really in-depth presentation to understand the situation that we're currently in. A question that I've raised previously with you, but I appreciate some further detail, is obviously the fact that 75% of the overspend comes from children and families, and obviously the biggest part of that comes from the residential placements. And given that already it is now more than double what was budgeted for at the beginning of the year, can you confirm or give a bit more meat on the bone in terms of how we're projecting we will be able to budget for that in the next financial year?
Thank you, Councillor Firth. So we have recognised that there is a significant increase in the number of children looked after, but the cost of those placements, which is what's really causing the pressure. So we have built that into the medium-term financial strategy, which is why we've got that larger gap next year of the 79 million. However, what we have recognised is that there's a lot of work that we're undertaking with the directorate, and the directorate are doing around the provision of placements for those children that we look after, and they're looking at what's called a mixed economy. So there are a number of different work streams happening. One is around looking at where we do need internal residential provision within the city and the area. So we're looking at that and where those places should be, and there has been identification, and we're aiming to get 8 new small living accommodation within the city, and the service is well on with doing that now. But obviously it's not just around getting the actual buildings, it's around staffing those buildings and being able to then safely move those children back from wherever they are into that safe setting, trying not to unsettle them, because obviously it's quite a big transition for them. But then also looking at those children that actually could come back to the city, come back to the area and move back with their family members, or where they can be placed with foster carers or special guardianships. So there's an awful lot of work doing around those children to see what's best for them, and that we safely do what's right for them within obviously bringing them back where we can accommodate them.
Councillor Firth, you want to come back?
Thank you very much, Victoria. I do appreciate that, and also second that point where it's clearly stated in the report that the number of placements has only increased by month 4 from 95 to 121, but the budget needed has actually doubled, and therefore it's the cost involved. And we do appreciate it is a national problem, but certainly we want to make sure that we are on top of it here in Leeds. I appreciate that further detail. On another matter within children's and families, there was also the mention of the ongoing issues with the Little Owls nursery provision. Obviously last year there was the 5% increase in fees, but also there is a note for a more comprehensive review of the provision of Little Owls ongoing at the moment. Is that effectively code speak for closures in the future?
Thank you. There has been a very in-depth review of the Little Owls provision that we currently provide, and we've looked at the statutory requirements around that provision and sufficiency. So around sufficiency of places, and whether the council should be providing that provision based on if there is sufficiency within the market, so that we're not venturing into taking where there is private sector provision. I haven't actually got the outcome of that review at the moment, but I know it will be reported to Executive Board in the coming months, because it is nearly complete. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth and Councillor Victoria. Councillor Firth, I'll bring you back again anyway. So next one is Councillor Bethel, please.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple. One of which is mainly just for my education and understanding. In terms of the capital borrowing, are we able to use capital receipts to pay off capital debt, or does that have to come out of the revenue account? That's just my information. In terms of the next year with 79 million, we know that there is a bringing down of government grant. When we say 79 million, do we include the fact that it's likely that the government settlement will not stretch as far as perhaps we would have wanted it to? Is that included in our projections? And then I also just wanted to take the opportunity in public to say how impressive it is that, given everything, there's still a slide in that presentation that says this is what we're doing to make sure that our communities still get what they need in terms of our capital stuff. I saw my own ward on there and I'm grateful for it. And just a public thank you to you guys in your team and you for steering the ship and keeping our heads above water in terms of making sure that there is still relatively above water, maybe is a more accurate term, but so that there is still, we're not in as dire a situation as many other councils. So I personally, and I'm sure the other councillors would echo, I'm really grateful for that work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just on around capital receipts, we can use capital receipts to repay borrowing. We can also use them under the flexibilities that we've currently got around transformation, so that we can invest in how we need to transform the council to be able to deliver the services in the most value for money way. And we do that. That is actually one of the areas that we're asking government around whether that's going to be extended, because at the moment it's only for a set period. I think it's till 24-25, but they have increase that over a number of years, so we're hoping that that's going to be okay going forward. With this 79 million, yes, that does include a reduction in what we're expecting to get in the settlement, but we do, because we raise income through council tax, you can see over the years that there has been a shift from local tax to local taxation from central grant. And you can see that shift in the modelling that we undertake. So that is included in there, yes. We've done forecasts. Okay.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Bithell, do you have a supplementary question?
No, that's Mangan, thanks.
Next one is Councillor Palmer.
Okay, so Victoria, I just want to echo what Councillor Bithell said. Particularly after the last item we were discussing about mental health and wellbeing, it's paramount that you and your team are able to reflect and just be human at the end of the day. There's a lot of pressure on yourselves. Appreciate that. I mean, I spent maybe 5 or 6 hours going through these 2 reports yesterday. There's a lot of information, a lot of flashing red lights and amber lights, and I think there were some very poignant things that you put in there that councillors need to be aware of. You mentioned that where was it, on page 85, the budget must fit, and we've got to stretch the envelope as far as we can. But one of the dangers facing ourselves and other councils is to kind of run away and not address the issues. And we can't do that, because that's one of the threats, I think, is the long-term threats. So we have to find the budget. We've got to balance it this year, haven't we? Just going on the point that Councillor Firth mentioned about the corporate, I was actually at the corporate parenting board meeting at Adelbeck, and the issue came up about looked after children. I think it was said that we've got about 1,500 at the moment, and I think it's expected that that's a peak. It's a high peak, but it's thought to be a peak. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, and I was going to ask before you mentioned it, was the issue of residential housing. And we had a presentation there, and there were some houses shown, and it seemed to be like an excellent idea. And obviously, with the looked after children budget being such a high contributory factor to our overspend, I'm just wondering whether going forwards we can explore that and build on that expansion of housing. I think it's a good idea, particularly for the children involved. Being looked after in only small houses, 2 or 3, not big old fashioned institutions. So the other thing is really, I've got a couple of questions and they're interlinked. One is, how on earth are we going to find the £34 million this year to balance the budget? How in such a short time, when we're not able to sell off assets quickly, in our climate? And my final point is, I'm very passionate about this idea of being a Marmot city. I'm a new councillor and I've been very impressed by the Best City Ambition, which we'll move on to later. But underpinning that and the Marmot and inequalities and readdressing them, as a councillor in Armley, which is one of the most deprived communities and so in need of financial support, I suppose if we do have to make cuts, we're going to have to make cuts. I'm imagining like a peel, like an onion, we peel away layers, and sometimes when we look at things financially, we think, oh yeah, the leisure centre, we don't need that, or the library can do with a few hours. And I just like now to make a direct appeal to people, wherever they are in the civic hall, in what position. At places like Armley, the leisure centre in Armley is absolutely in need of being kept going at full capacity and without any additional costs to people who use them. I can tell you, every morning at 10 o'clock, it is absolutely buzzing. It's full of people, especially women. And we were talking about women's mental health earlier and well-being. We're a poor community. If we start to put costs and charges onto that particular leisure centre, people just will go away and there'll be a knock-on effect. So I'm just appealing now that when decisions are made and cuts are going to come, it's just an appeal that places like Armley's Leisure Centre are ring-fenced, if at all possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for those questions. The first I would say around the internal residential is something that we're trying to get the balance right, and it's very difficult because ideally you'd want children to come back and to either be with their families or foster carers, etc., in that family setting, and there is a risk that you do too much of one thing at the detriment for others. So the service is working really hard around what is that balance and what should we be doing without doing too much or not enough, if you get what I mean. And then the biggest risk from a financial perspective is that we invest in the homes and then we can't staff them. Otherwise there's no point of having them. So we're having to parallel run to make sure that we've got the staff in place to be able to do that. But it is a better ideal than having children outside the area. And that's what we're trying to look at. I think with regard to the 34 million to balance the budget, we're doing everything we can in year, but we recognise that there is going to be a pressure at the end of the year. There is going to be an overspend, and that will have to come from the reserves that we've got available. Now, that does mean that we will have less reserves for next year. And therefore we're very mindful of the level of the reserves that we've got and what we need to do. Now, we have been building those over the last few years, the reserves, just to get us into a position where we are more resilient, but not to have them too high that we're at the detriment of frontline services. And we've been noting that over the last few years, where we want to be, what we're trying to get to, and we will be keeping an eye on that. But we will have to, once we've done everything we can with this year and brought in those savings early where we possibly can, is that we will have to use reserves for that level of overspend. But we have built that into the budget going forward, that pressure. So we know that for next year, as I've said, that's why the gap is so large. Unfortunately, we have got some hard decisions to make as a council, because we have got to make some decisions that mean that the council is sustainable for the future. So the decisions that we will be making will be around rebasing the council, looking at what we statutorily have to provide, what do we provide for prevention, So to make sure that we're not causing cost increases further upstream, and that we're doing the things that the members of the public want us to do, but within the envelope that we've got available. So that it is going to be a tough year, and the next few years are going to be tough. As I've shown you on the projection, we're up in those high 50s around the savings. So it is going to be a challenge for us all, but it needs to be done so that we can provide services to those people who need it the most, whatever level of that service will be. Okay. I would love to say we've got loads of money and what we're going to invest it in, but that's not where we are, unfortunately. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Do you want to come back, Councillor Palmer, or? Thank you. Okay, Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, just to echo what colleagues have said, it's the work you're doing is incredible. Given the cuts, the situation we faced over a number of years, it's remarkable that we are still, as an authority, offering the services that we are. I honestly don't know how it's been done, and I'm thankful that it has, and for the incredible work that's gone into it and the detail in what you've presented to us as well. But just to ask that when decisions are being made, that ward members and community committees are engaged at the earliest possible opportunity and given opportunities to feed back, to explore perhaps alternative solutions where they are available, be that on car parking charges or others. That's just a recent example in our area that's hit the outer northwest in particular. I understand the context, but just to, wherever possible, engage with the representatives as early as possible so that we can be a part of the solution, and that we can then engage more effectively with residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Faith, briefly, do you want to ask a question, please?
I'd expect nothing less. Thank you very much, Teacher. I just want to ask if for more meat on the bone could be provided, more detail, because in the second report, in terms of looking at the situation for the MTFS, it says that obviously with the key headline of the budget gap of £251 million over 5 years, there's a colossal sum, but it's not actually down to a lack of funding, as the report makes plain. It's assumed that there's going to be an additional £101 million worth of funding. And the problem for the funding gap is cited that, as has been mentioned, the increased demand and the demography pressures and the pay awards, which together expect to outweigh the amount of money that we're expecting by 3 times. And I just wondered whether we could give some more detail on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Victoria, do you want to respond, please?
The funding that we receive is staying at a similar level. We are increasing council tax and business rates, so it means that over that period we have got that additional funding. A lot, it's generated locally as well, and we do get specific grants. But what I would say is that the demand for local government services has significantly increased due to mainly because of we've come out of the pandemic. People have gone straight into a cost of living crisis, and the cost of providing those services, if we've seen children's, but this is across all directorates, have increased. So the amount that it costs us to buy those goods and services is more than it was previously because of the level of inflation, and therefore you get this gap. So at the moment we've not got enough funding to be able to deliver the increased cost of those services, and that's what we're experiencing, and that's why we've got that 250 million gap over the next 5 years.
Thank you, Victoria. Are you happy? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Hinckley, please.
Thanks very much. Very quick one, just to echo colleagues' comments, but also to ask whether you're feeding into the community committee review and how that's going to impact funding for them committees. Thanks.
I'm not at the moment, but we will be doing. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
That's fine. Thank you. Next one is Councillor Chapman, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to also echo the comments from the other members about the quality of the report that we've got and the detail that's in it. I've got a couple of comments, possibly more than questions. One is I'm glad to see we are finally looking at bringing children's homes back into the city and not outsourcing them somewhere else. It's something some of us have promoted for quite a while. And it's good to see that recognised. But what I want to comment on is the slowness sometimes of this decision making. And you can see it in the Little Owls review. I mean, we've got a Little Owls nursery. And I seem to remember having a briefing and conversation about it a year ago. So it's taken a year to do the review. Victoria, you've still not seen that review. So then it's going to take several more months to make a decision. And we need to be able to do these things more quickly. I understand we need to do it thoroughly, but we also need to do it a little bit more quickly. And I sometimes think maybe the departments and directorates don't respond as quickly as they could do. And it was interesting, actually, that you said one of the actions that you're taking is to make people understand they can't just spend outside their budget. That should be a given. If you've got a budget, you've got a budget. You shouldn't just assume that your budget's there as a guideline and you can go off and spend it anyway. And I think those are all things that link together. And the other thing I wanted to comment on was Councillor Parnham, completely agree. We need to have a look at the decisions that are being made and the impact on the local communities. It's not just the most deprived communities, it's all communities where some decisions are being taken that are short term. We're flogging off the family silver to fix a gap, but once that silver's gone, we're never going to get it back. And we do need to make sure we make those decisions, that we are aware of the impact of those decisions when we make them, and we don't just willy-nilly run around selling anything off because we're in a financial pickle right now.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Does anybody want to pick up? Oh, Victoria, do you want to come back?
Oops. Yeah, I'll come back. Just on a couple of those comments. So what I would say is that decision making does take time because we're wanting to make sure that we get the decisions that we make correct. However, we do know that across the council there is work pressures. And we've recognised that in the directorates and especially around children's and families. So we have put in some investment around transformation. So we've got some of that capacity because people are trying to do this as part of the day job and it's very, very difficult and they're picking it up. And so that's why we've recognised the need for that we need to put the investment in to enable them to move these things more quickly. So that's something that we have done. Around the budget accountability, I think it's something that we need to do more work on. And it's something that we need to do with all officers across the council, and that's something that we are doing. And the new financial system will enable us to do that because at the moment, it's very difficult budget holders to have the information at the fingertips, and that's what we want going forward, which is why we're investing in the new system to enable them to have access to information in a timely fashion, real time, as you do with your bank. If you have it on an app on your phone, it's that type of thing that we're striving to give our budget holders that information. I would say that as part of the service reviews, there will be impact assessments undertaken, the impact that they will have, so that when decision makers are making those decisions, they are aware of it. But as I have said right through it, we are going to have to make some difficult decisions to make sure that the services that we do provide have the resources that they've got for sustainability. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I've got Councillor Kitchen next, please.
Mine's just a question. In Morley, we've been given this, or we've been awarded this town deal, which is just short of 25 million. And bearing in mind, it seems to be all Leeds City Council. There's quite a lot of people working on the board, and actually the work is done by the Leeds City Council people. Does that connect with our accounts or anything? Do you understand what I'm meaning? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The funding that we received for Morley Town Deal is a town fund, is ring fenced and specifically for that purpose. Therefore, we can't use that for something else. Otherwise, we'd have clawback and all sorts of issues. So that grant was specifically to deliver that project. So that's what will happen. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what concerns me there is the amount of work being done by Leeds City Council. You know, all right, it's ring fenced, you know, at some stage, is that money going to come to you for the people that are working from Leeds City Council?
I'd have to look in the specifics, but I'm assuming we will be able to claim from that grant to fund those roles and the work that's been undertaken.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. Finally, I've got Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Victoria. I'm not sure you'll be able or willing to answer my question. Every year, obviously, there's a staff saving budget line, isn't there, based on turnover, natural wastage. But given the conversation we had this morning about stress, mental health, staff wellbeing, and the recent announcements in the press regarding potential loss of jobs, how likely, as I say, I've got that in inverted commas, how likely is that we are going to have to lose some staff positions?
What I would say is that the work that we're undertaking is around rebasing the council. So this is looking at the statutory services that we deliver, how we deliver those services, the preventative services, and then the priority services, and looking at them in the whole and saying within this envelope, what can we afford to do? That means that we're either going to have to stop, significantly reduce, or reduce some services by certain amounts. So inevitably there's going to be job losses. But what we've got to do that, because we know through the staff survey that people workload is an issue. So we can't just keep reducing and expecting people to work longer hours, more time, not because that affects the mental health and the well-being. So that's why we have got to do this rebase. And it will mean that we have to stop or reduce some services that we provide. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do it. So inevitably there will be, unfortunately. How those jobs are the workforce leave is what we're working through at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you very much for your honesty. So I think it's vital, isn't it, that at earliest opportunity possible, we start to work with the staff and give people opportunities to move into alternative employment or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Firth, briefly now.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, it was because of Councillor Burke's question. I just had one final point, which is the fact that in the past few years, we've had issues with the Early Leavers Initiative and other ways in which to reduce the number of staff costs that we have. Can we just have the assurance that this will be based on our demand as an authority rather than out of actually people volunteering to come forward to be taken out of posts, and that actually going forward it will be based on what we need, but make sure that we are delivering those services that we treasurely need to provide for residents.
Thank you, Sam. Andy, do you want to come?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, we can give that assurance. So to deliver the reduction in the workforce that Victoria's mentioned, we do need to find ways and means of managing that. And what we will shortly launch is a voluntary leaver scheme, but it will be targeted. So it won't be an open scheme where anybody can put their hand up and seek a severance payment to exit. It will be based very much on the specific services that they are undertaking and the teams that they're working in. So it will be different from previous schemes, Councillor, and we will go through that process in due course. And you're right, Councillor Burke, we will obviously do what we can to redeploy and have that workforce flexibility as well to avoid compulsory redundancies.
Thank you, Andy. Victoria or Mariana, we have all seen the media reports on Birmingham and the Section 114 notice. We are in a different position, and surely we do not have the same issues in relation to equal pay claims. It is worry. Can you give us some further reassurance on the difference between our position and that of the Birmingham position, please?
Sorry, I was just going to say it's probably better if Andy does the specific on equal pay, and then Victoria and I can come in on the Section 114 if that's okay.
Okay, so in terms of equal pay, so people will be familiar with the position of Birmingham Council and other councils that have a legacy equal pay claims. Many of you will be aware that this council settled its equal pay issues many years ago. And since then, we've had very robust mechanisms in place like job evaluation, appropriate engagement with staff and trade unions to ensure that our pay framework is fair. As a council, we have no outstanding equal pay claims, so we are not in the position as many other councils. However, it's always appropriate that we are mindful about equal pay for work of equal value, and we are undertaking an equal pay audit, which is good practice for us to do so, to make sure that our pay structures are fair and equitable. And we'll be reporting back to members and officers over the next few months on the outcome of that. Thank you.
So just on the other reasons around the section 114, I'd say the main difference is that we're very clear, we're transparent with you all on the financial position, what we need to achieve, how we're going to achieve that over the next few years, and we're working very closely with members around the decisions that will need to be taken. And I would say that the leader and the deputies and also Tom have been, as chief exec, been very clear on what we need to do to make sure that we do set a balanced budget. We've got plans that we're starting to develop now on how we will do that, and those are coming to executive board and then to hearing, obviously some on Wednesday and then the further ones in December. So that's why we're not in a section 114 position. But we, as I keep saying, we know we've got some of those hard decisions to take, but members know they've got to take them. So I think that's why we're not in the position that Birmingham and some other councils are in at the moment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you, Andy. Thank you for responding the questions and comments, Andy and Victoria. And also, are we happy with the recommendation in the report on page 27 and 83? Yes. Thank you. Before we move on, I would like to add also thanks to your work, Victoria, and to your whole team for trying to get us through this difficult and challenging period. It is not easy. So I would like to put on our record of thanks, for what you've done. Thank you. Now it's been expressed by members they need a comfort break for 10 minutes. We've been in this meeting for more than 2 hours. So 10 minutes for a comfort break. Thank you. Welcome back to Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board. And we're going to go item number, we are now moving to agenda item 10, which is the Best City Ambition update. Mike is to run through the report and presentation. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Chair. And I guess off the back of the item that Victoria's just talked through, just to set the context for this, I suppose, and we absolutely need to be really mindful and reflective about our financial context when we're having the conversation about the Best City Ambition. But equally, as the Chair mentioned at the very, very beginning of the meeting, a number of people have referenced since, it's also important that we do maintain our sort of clear ambition and direction that we're aiming for. Perhaps even more importantly, when times are really, really tough, and we need to make sure that any resources we do have, we're absolutely making the most of. And Victoria referenced how the Best City Ambition has been part of some of that thinking and decision making around the budget. And just the other thing to mention, I suppose, is recognition that adopting the Best City Ambition was I suppose a recognition that this isn't just about the council, it's also about partners across the city and everyone playing their part. And we've already got some really good examples of how we can galvanise that spirit across Leeds, that team Leeds approach, so that other people do step up, and it's not just for the council. And I'll reflect a little bit on that as we go through. So hopefully everyone around the table is relatively familiar now with the Best City Ambition, but Rob, if you go to the next slide, just really briefly as a reminder, this is about the overall vision for the future of Leeds, and very deliberately about that ambition we have to tackle poverty and inequality, which the council's had for some time now, and we, I suppose, sort of reframed a little bit through the Best City Ambition when it was adopted a couple of years ago. And as I've just touched on, this is about being ambitious and optimistic for the future, even when times are tough. Very crucially, it's not just about what we want to do, it's also, and possibly more so, about how we want to do it. So that what is those three pillars of health and wellbeing, inclusive growth, and zero carbon or net zero. Choose your flavour on that one. But it's also about team Leeds approach, which is how we want to do it. And that's something that we very much see as being for the long term. Over years, individual priorities will change, but the way that we want to work as a city won't. So that's what this leads with. And on the next slide is just a reminder, this isn't new information. This is what the Best City Ambition currently says about what Team Leeds is. And it tries to summarise it into these 6 principles, which are really about working with people, co-production and co-design, and building respect. It's about shifting power to communities, and our language is possibly a little bit old here now, which things change quite quickly, and we talk a little bit more now about the idea of community power. It's about being led by evidence. It's about that investment in prevention and early intervention that we've just talked about. It's about recognising the connections between society and the economy. We talk a lot about the connections between work and health, and how you cannot look at these things separately. And that's what we try to do through that bit in the middle of our 3 pillars, which is where a lot of the really crucial action happens. And it's, as I touched on, about everyone playing their part. And I'll come on to sort of what we're going to focus on through this update of the Best City Ambition, but this is a key part of it. Similarly, we've got the 3 pillars there on screen. And when we circulated the presentation to you in advance of the meeting, I've also put in the next 6 slides, which I'm not going to go through now unless you want me to when we come to questions, but they go into all of the detail, I suppose, around those 3 visions we have for the 3 pillars and the 5 key priorities that we identify underneath each one. So I'm going to ask Rob to just cycle through those 6 slides if possible, please. Perfect to that one. Thank you very much. So, as I mentioned, we've already got some really good evidence that through adopting the Best City Ambition and moving in this direction, we have been able to galvanise partners across the city in a way that many already were, really, but to pull this together and articulate more clearly the role that everybody can play. And in November last year, I can't believe it's nearly a year ago, when we had our peer review, there was some really, really positive feedback, even at that stage. And when you bear in mind, this was only 6 months or so after we actually adopted the Best City Ambition. And as you can see on screen, there were some really encouraging reflections about the ownership that's already felt of this, as a direction of travel, no doubt built through, in large part, through the pandemic and that team leads approach that we saw very sort of clearly on the ground in communities. But clearly, you know, there's a lot that we can build on here. And as the final point says, the Best City Ambition has been a powerful way to bring people together, even at a time of less resources. And this is what we want to try and build on now. So if you go to the next slide, please, Rob. There are three key things we want to look at through this update of the Best City Ambition. And as I've put right at the beginning there, this isn't about an overhaul. This is only 2 years old. We think the direction, the framework is right. And the feedback we've had already from members and certainly the feedback we've had from partners, I suppose, endorses that. But it's about aiming for that continuous improvement and evolution, and also recognising the progress that has been made since it was adopted 2 years ago. So there are three things we want to focus on. The first is putting into place all of the things that we've been working on through the transitional period, as we've called it, shifting from the Best Council Plan to the Best City Ambition. And many of those things are things that elected members through community committees and other routes have already fed into. A couple of the really key things there, I suppose, are a recognition and understanding of our wider strategic framework and the partnerships that we have in the city to drive this work forward. And sorry, Rob, if you just go back a slide. And the second thing there is around the progress measures that we've got in place to understand if we're making a difference. And I was asked some really tough questions a couple of years ago, reflecting on the Best Council Plan around, you know, can we really confidently say we understand the detail about the change that we've made? And if we're honest, the answer was possibly no. So what we've done since then is develop a much deeper framework for understanding that, and I'll touch on that very briefly in a moment. The second thing is reflecting on that we've got two of the three pillars have got new key strategies that have just launched in the last couple of months. We've got a new health and wellbeing strategy and a new inclusive growth strategy, which a huge amount of work and engagement has gone into. So we need to make sure that what's come out of those two processes is reflected and embedded within the Best City Ambition. And on that third pillar around zero carbon, as you'll all know, it's a rapidly moving and changing agenda. And there are probably some areas that we know we can strengthen within the ambition. So not least, that all we focus on at the moment is carbon reduction, which is still massively important, but we also need to think about biodiversity and the natural environment. And so we need to bring that in there as well. And then the third thing is what I've touched on already. It's about developing the team leads approach. So we've got those principles I touched on, and there might be opportunities for us to strengthen them or to put them into, dare I say, slightly plainer English, so that everyone really knows what we're talking about there. But what we want to do is the next bit, I suppose, which is start to set out really practically in some ways, what does that look like on the ground when it's working? And there are already loads of good examples we can learn from and see what we can apply to other areas of the city and other areas of policy or services or partnerships. But we want to try and set some of that out so it really brings it to life. And next slide, please, Rob. So just on that, I won't read these out to you, but there are four, I suppose, key areas there that we're thinking about in terms of that development of team leads. And it really sort of, it's quite broad. So it looks at what we're doing as a local authority and what we're doing with our partners as well. Very much thinking about that community level, that integrated locality working. And that further thought I touched on around how do you shift power to citizens? So it's I suppose the next steps of what in the past we might have talked about around doing with, not doing to. It's sort of how do you take that further? And we've got a really strong track record in Leeds of thinking this way, of doing work like this. If you think right back to those who were around for the Commission on the Future of Local Government sort of 10, 12 years ago, this is really a recasting of some of that thinking for 2023 and beyond. Next slide, please, Rob. And I also touched on the other area, very much sort of challenged and pushed by elected members, was around assessing progress. And apologies, we're halfway through a round of community committees. So I know some of you have heard me give a slightly longer discussion about this, and some of you haven't heard anything yet. So there's something to look forward to. But there are three key areas that we're looking at assessing progress. The first is, as you'd expect, the normal performance metrics that we've got in strategies, which long-standing, won't dwell on that. The other two are slightly more interesting. The first is our 3-yearly joint strategic assessment, which is a very deep dive analysis of the city that we look at it in a couple of different ways. We look at policy areas, so environment, housing, health, education, etc. And we also look at it based on a life course. So bringing all of that together to look at working well, living well, aging well, starting well, and what the different impacts look like. We're just kicking off the work on the 2024 Joint Strategic Assessment. So that will be a really, really crucial tool for us, really well matched, if you like, to the ambitions that we set out. A lot of the things in the Best City Ambition are not things that are going to change on a quarterly or even an annual basis. In some cases, I always use life expectancy as an example. That doesn't change every year. This is something we need to look at over a 3, 5, 10-year timescale, and the Joint Strategic Assessment is a really helpful way for us to do that. The second thing is something that's been developed since we adopted the Best City Ambition, with the work led by my colleagues in economic policy, and that's the Leeds Social Progress Index, which hopefully people have had a chance to familiarise themselves with now. Absolutely phenomenal tool for us to think about impacts at a ward level. Loads and loads of future potential for how we can use that tool, how we can sort of draw things out of it to inform better, more evidence-led decision making. So that's something we're really excited about, and will give us that constant touch point in between joint strategic assessment periods, so you've not got nothing in that 3-year period. There's some of the key issues we want to focus on through this update of the ambition. We're bringing this to you really, really early. So as you know, we'd normally come to you in January. We've already got a draft of the update, and you would, I suppose, traditionally scrutinise it in that sense. We're bringing this to you before we've put pen to paper at all, to get any early views, any early steers, anything do you think we really need to bear in mind as we do this work. And as you can see, we're sort of aiming for those initial proposals to Executive Board in November, December time, keeping that flexible as we go on with the engagement. And then ultimately it will come back to you to undertake that more formal scrutiny role in January ahead of full council in February. So I will stop there, Chair, but really happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike, for running through the presentation report, and you did attend the Innis Committee, and we really enjoyed your presentation and the vision as well for the Best City Ambition. Now, I would like to open the board members for any comments or questions, please. And Councillor Firth was on the list.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll try not to ask the same questions I asked at the Outer North East Community Committee, although I know that they were very robust, specifically around the Housing Advisory Panel and making sure that, as you say, devolving that power down as far as it can go to our communities is a really key thing that we think that certainly should be taken forward generally. And I hope that's integrated into the Community Committee review with our representatives from this board. I just want to ask about KPIs, which I know I've raised before, which is the fact that 2 of the major KPIs are very long term. And without this being a 5-10-year plan, that ultimately we need to see on the ground how we're actually delivering generally for our residents in terms of the difficult situation that we're in. Will the report that comes to council 2 years on from the starting of Best City Ambition, that comes in February, outline, as it's been mentioned in the presentation and the report, the individual KPIs that we're going to be looking at for each strategy that's been mentioned that we're going to be analysing? Just simply because otherwise it seems to be that we're having very lofty ambitions, but we're not actually then providing the meat on the bone in terms of being able to understand how we're delivering that regularly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Mike, do you want to come back?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Firth. So we've tended to treat the KPIs as part of the performance reporting framework, with an annual performance report that came to Executive Board in September. So that's generally the way that we've approached that, rather than embedding them within the Best City Ambition, given they already sort of have a home in their home strategy, if you like. What we will do in the report that comes in February is set out very, very clearly how that all fits together and signpost very clearly to where that information is. So we're not going to duplicate it within the Best City Ambition, but we'll set out the framework of how it fits together and how it will evidence what we want to monitor.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor, do you have a supplementary question?
I just have a general point, which is I think that given the current financial situation that the council is in, and given the situation that there are a lot of ambitions and details that are provided without the actual delivery alongside it, I want to make sure that this report is proved to be necessary rather than actually we should be focusing elsewhere on frontline services. That was a general point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. First of all, I like this report. I like the sentiments that are in it. I'd just like to see them being implemented far more quickly. You say that one of the key things is about how do we shift power to citizens, and doing things with them and not doing it to them. Well, I'd suggest that we listen to them, and that the local communities know their local areas best. They're the people that should be making their decisions. I understand not every decision can be made in a local area, but I do think we should be looking to listen to our people. And when a contentious issue comes up, we should be looking at that objectively and constructively and not obstructively. We've got an issue in Rothwell with our council officers where no one will listen to us. No one has helped in the last 7 or 8 years to get us to a point. No one supported the community in pulling together the information the council needs to make a balanced decision. So now we are in a position of something being done to us and not being considered what we want to do. And that is one of the biggest things I think this should be focusing on. I'll probably shut up there because I could go on forever, but I do think in terms of as a really good example, Rothwell Council officers will make a really good case study, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about that in more detail.
Mariana, do you want to come back?
Thanks, Councillor Chapman. I mean, I think we just need to be clear what this is and what it isn't, because this is kind of like quite a strategic document that's intended to, guide a lot of what the council does and indeed what, all the partners do in the city, but it won't answer every sort of tick and turn and every bit of detail, I'm afraid. I mean, more than happy to have a think about whether or not we can use that case study, more than happy to feed that, as I'm sure you will, Councillor Chapman, into like the community committee review, for example. Because I think what this is that very top line thing that then, as I say, creates the context for everything else. And that's why the measurement thing, Councillor Firth, is also not quite as straightforward as, you kind of invest something there and you get a definite return back on it, or it's definitely the right thing to do, because this is about that intent rather than a really, really detailed plan. And, some people might say, well, why bother then? I think, we would argue that this is what galvanizes people in the city, and we are getting there. But, sometimes I share your frustration, Councillor Chapman, we don't always get there perhaps as quickly as we would want to get. But the reason I went off, as I mentioned, was just to join a partner call with the leader and Tom. So this, we invited partners in, given the announcements last week, and we just had a quick call with them. And what you get on that call is, it was with kind of education sector, faith sector, third sector, businesses. And what you get is people, kind of really grateful that the council is open and engaging, that it is still being ambitious despite the financial challenge, and that people do want and keen to play their part. So that's why I think we would say this remains quite an important part of work, even though it doesn't always result in absolutely tangible stuff immediately.
Thank you, Mariana. Councillor Chapman, do you have any supplementary question or? Yeah, okay, thank you. No, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, that's fine. No. Now, thank you, Mike, once again for attending the Statutory Resources Scrutiny Committee meeting as well, and going through the report and presentation. And thank you for those comments and questions. Are we happy with the recommendation in the pay report on the page 201? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mike. So we now move on to agenda item 11, which is the work programme schedule. Guests are also welcome to stay to hear the discussion, but if you're not, thank you for attending today's meeting. So thank you. Rob, it's over to you now.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be fairly brief, conscious we've been meeting for a while now. I think the main issue is to respond to discussion at the last board meeting where we discussed moving the staff networks item in response to a query from you, Councillor Burke. So I've taken that away. I've met with the networks, and it wasn't reflected in today's papers because I couldn't do it before publication, but it would now be the February meeting when that is going to be brought forward, and we're just shuffling the agenda around for December currently. So you'll get a more accurate picture of that when that comes out next time. But in short, we've adjusted the work programme by shuffling the agendas a little bit for the future meetings. I think that's it, really, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on the work programme? No. Just to update Councillor Chapman, we're pleased to know that you have been nominated to go on the committee review. So you will be nominated by the Statutory Resources Committee. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Burke.
Just one question, Chair. The community committee review, which I take it will both be on now. Is it an idea to bring that back to scrutiny at some point? Perhaps initially, because it won't be finished, but
it might be that I'll be able to provide updates outside of the meeting. Certainly, I'd look to do that with colleagues. But it's the Environment, Housing, Communities Board there playing more of a lead role in that review. But Councillor, happy to provide you with information as that goes on. So no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll be glad to know that this brings us to the end of today's business. Thank you for all of you for your contribution, and I look forward to your next meeting on the 11th of December at 10 a.m. And the pre-meeting is going to be 9:30. Thank you, and have a safe journey back home.